Welcome to the Freelance Tribe. Here we talk with skilled freelancers about their professional journey. Stay tuned for real-life experiences to learn and actionable steps to take to improve your freelancing career. My name is Yuri. I'm a community builder at Code Control and 9am.works, and my guest is Christopher Tester, a professional voice actor who works on projects big, Google, BMW, Creative Assembly, etc., and small, answer phone messages for his local cat cafe. And you can even hear him when playing the Nurgle clan in Total War Warhammer 3. So, welcome, Christopher.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Talking about your experience, for you, what is the difference between playing a demon that vomits other demons and guiding employees through a health and safety video?
Well, I suppose it depends on the health and safety video, to be honest, especially if that one involves either demons or lots of vomiting. So sometimes they can be very closely aligned, which is surprising. But ultimately, ultimately, you're looking to get some kind of response from your audience. You know, you're creating content, you're putting yourself out there to get some kind of response. As a demon that's vomiting and defecating at the same time, for example, then that's usually quite a comedic response. But there's something kind of visceral about it. Whereas if you're doing an explainer video or anything, that you still want to command people's attention. So although the message and the content itself may be completely different, it's not happening in a vacuum. So I think, being able to create something that is memorable and engaging, whether or not that's how viscerally that you manage to throw up, or whether or not it's how engaging your tone is and how you explain something in a manner which, so that people actually take on that information rather than, just fall asleep and let everything kind of like go over their heads. That is kind of like the thing, is that rather than the focus being on the voice and the voice sounding nice, or the voice, sounding demonic if you're playing a demon, the actual main priority is that it's connecting in some way with the audience, which is what I'm really all about in all of the work that I do, at least what I try to be about anyway.
Talking about demon, I can understand it, but how to add emotions while you're going through safety video?
Yeah, so I think in order to because it's kind of become almost a cliche now, but
Mm.
we deal in emotions as opposed to just purely information. If it's just purely information, then get an AI voice to do it, because it'll speak clearly and it'll speak at the speed that you want it to, and you can manipulate it to be faster or slower, or to speak lower or higher, and all of those kind of things. And so increasingly, with the emotional thing is what actually registers with an audience in any kind of way. And rather than it just being an emotion in an isolation,
Mm.
it's kind of intertwined with storytelling, essentially. So taking you from one thing to another thing. So, for an explainer video, you may be telling people to do certain things, but you'll start by saying, these are the reasons why they need to do the stuff that you're going to tell them to do.
Mhm.
So normally you might start from a fear, a place of anxiety or fear or uncertainty and confusion before then coming on to a much more reassuring tone as a result. So it's again that kind of sense that the audience is going on some form of kind of like journey, and that they can feel that there's any kind of like value with it. So obviously you're not going to necessarily have the same level of emotion in a voice if you start laughing and screaming in an explainer video about how to use a ladder correctly. Then probably people are going to go, what the hell is going on? As opposed to taking on the information that you actually want them to take on. But in order for them to at least remain engaged and at least not fall asleep, that's where the kind of like the emotion kind of comes in. So finding kind of what the concern or issue might be from an audience's perspective, and then
Mhm.
maybe kind of like filtering in a bit of that emotion to begin with. So if they are anxious, or if they are concerned, or if they are uncertain, or all of those kind of things, to have that in the voice to begin with, so that you
Mhm.
can then have a kind of a vocal transition, as opposed to just being kind of monotone all the way through, and the information may be clear, but if I speak like this for 20 minutes, you're going to be asleep after five, that kind
Exactly.
of thing. Yeah.
And yeah, I admired your voice from the moment I heard you, and it's amazing. But I bet it was never like that. So when did you understand the power of your voice?
I mean, this goes back way, 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 way back to, my love of acting, I suppose. And that was when, my mum went to take me to see Shakespeare. It's a
Mm.
very kind of stereotypical, especially in the UK, a stereotypical story of a young child being taken to a theatre to see some Shakespeare. And the vast majority of children go, "What the hell is this? I don't like it. I am bored. I want my sweets and my Game Boy." Whereas I was like, oh, wow, this is so poetic and it's actually
Mm.
affecting me in some kind of way. And it's the fact that it was all scaled back from any kind of spectacle. It was literally the shows that I saw kind of like growing up. It's just a few actors on a stage and being able to command attention, not through, the pyrotechnics, but just from the spoken word. And again, going back to the emotion and also the kind of the poetry, but also the skills of those performers to be able to be heard so that you could hang on every word and, how they use language in a very kind of particular way, and how it can kind of like resonate in you as well. So I suppose kind of seeing Shakespeare and, these plays are about like Roman generals and, dictators and, all of those kind of things. And yet, because of the way that they actually kind of communicate, and it's one of the wonderful things about Shakespeare anyway, is that you can actually find something very universal.
Hmm.
That's the whole reason why, those plays and that language is so effective, is that, someone can be a Danish prince, and yet they can, say to be or not to be, and that can be yes, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason because, we've all had those moments, in some way, shape, or form. So that is the long-winded reason as to, my first kind of connection with the power of the voice, the power of communication, and how with nothing else, just the spoken text, it could have a real effect on people.
What was your first professional usage of your voice?
The first professional usage of my voice. Well, I did a lot of stage work. So my first before I did any voiceover work. So I did quite a bit of theatre in the regions in the UK after I graduated from drama school. So there was that. And then in terms of my first voiceover job, so where I was specifically just the voice and nothing else, was in a video game. That was back
Hmm.
in, I think, 2012, and it was for a game called Dark Souls, which some people might know about. And that was when I was playing a half man, half scorpion. And when I was auditioning for it, I was, trying to use all of my acting skills of what does a half man, half scorpion sound like. And, I came up with this huge, great kind of dramatic voice. And then they stopped me after about 5 seconds and just said, no, no, just speak it as you. I was like, oh, okay, right, sure, fine. Because, they wanted to have the focus on the character rather than whether or not you could do a good monster impression. So that
Mm.
was the first time, actually, which was hilarious, but also, a lot of fun, and for a franchise that a lot of people kind of care about. So that was cool.
And why did you decide to transition from acting on the stage to
Mhm.
voiceover and to doing voiceover?
Money. There you go.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, mainly. I mean, I've always loved the idea of kind of voiceover stuff generally, but I can't pretend that, um, growing up, I always wanted to be a voice actor, or that I wanted to perform in cartoons and do loads of different kind of like crazy voices. That wasn't really my thing. But then over the course of like probably about 2015, 2016 was when I realized, the whole variety of different voice acting out there, in
Hmm.
actual fact, that, there were voice actors who just did work in games, that it didn't matter what you looked like. Which is good. I mean, I say that from a very privileged position of being a white middle class man, where it's not so much of a problem in a lot of things because there's no shortage of roles for people like that. Certainly in the UK, and yet it's kind of limiting in terms of the roles that you can play to a certain degree. And also, to be honest, I find there's much more opportunities to learn stuff on the jobs that you're doing. So especially when you're doing documentary work, for example, which is one of my other passions. Um, it gives you an excuse to learn about something that you might know absolutely nothing about.
Mm,
It kind of has
yeah.
that same appeal, like when I did a play where I did a play where I played Lance Armstrong,
Mm,
the kind of the famous peloton cyclist, who was then done for use of various different types of drugs. And I loved that project partly because, I had to do lots of research about the
yeah.
character and, get into his mindset and not try and judge him, but kind of understand in a twisted kind of way what he was doing. And so therefore I had to research about a sport I knew nothing about, which I found kind of fascinating. And I think there's even more opportunities because you could maybe voice four, five, six different voiceover scripts in a day, and they could all be about completely different things.
Yeah.
And yes, occasionally it might be one about ladder safety, which might not be the most exciting subject in the world, but you're still learning. You're always hopefully learning something. But increasingly there's an opportunity to discover more and more, and I love that kind of variety. Plus, it's something I can do from home. And I got to a certain stage where various bits of me were seizing up or dropping off. And therefore, the idea of kind of like touring around and living out of hotels and never seeing my wife and all of those kind of things, when I was in my 20s, that was great because it's, not exactly the rock and roll lifestyle, but, it's bohemian and I'm a traveling player. And then you kind of get to the end of it and you're like, your liver's not much better. You're still broke. You've now got to go for the next job. You've got to be dependent on other people to get the next job. Whereas if I'm voicing from home, you know, I can regiment myself a lot better. And
Yeah.
so from a mental health mindset, that's really golden for me, I'd say.
I definitely understand the power of voice. Like, I can feel it. But from your perspective as a voice actor, tell me why the voice is important for people on both sides, those who speak and those who listen.
Okay, so I mean, I think in terms of the voice, it's obviously how you communicate, how you come across. It's as important, if not more important, in terms of making that first impression and a real kind of like contact. How you choose to communicate will have such a huge impression on the people, and how you again receive that information and make sure things land and make sure that you're understood, I think is so kind of crucially important. So in terms of having that combination of being able to be articulate and to really describe what it is that you're saying, to be able to imbue meaning and significance into it in a kind of in today's attention economy where we're all on our phones kind of doom scrolling all of the time, and we give things less than 3 seconds before we move on to the next thing, to be able to have the capacity to command attention and say, I am worth listening to, and these are the reasons why, without going into a kind of sell, sell, sell kind of mindset, because people are kind of impervious to that to a degree anyway now. As soon as people start shouting, that's the least attractive things, and people know that they're being sold to, and they start to question, and they don't have that kind of like trust. Whereas what we're looking through in social media and in day-to-day interactions is that form of understanding and connection. And so I think whether or not you're trying to navigate your family or your business or your relationship with clients or your relationship with colleagues and all of that kind of stuff, being able to efficiently communicate and express yourself succinctly and powerfully at the same time is of you can't really put a value on that. Although when a client asks me for a
Yeah.
quote, I obviously will. But yeah, I think that's the valuable thing. So knowing how to control it,
Hmm.
what the variables are and what is actually in your control, rather than going, oh, I'm a great communicator, or I'm not a great communicator, or I'm a great communicator in certain contexts or with certain people and not with
Hmm.
other people. Because a lot of actors are extroverts, and but then there are a whole other bunch of us who are probably, I think it's omniverts, like actually quite like a lot of time on my own. But at the same time, if I've got a script and an audience and I know what it is that I'm saying, then I
Hmm.
kind of thrive.
Hmm.
And there's a process.
Yeah.
It's not just, are you born with it? Are you not born with it? it takes training, and it takes conscious practice to be able to become a good communicator. And that's something that I continue to try and do, whether I'm voicing a vomiting demon or voicing an explainer video. Yeah.
Talking about training, how do you train your voice daily?
How do I train my voice daily? Well, about 15 years ago, I'd have said, well, I have a coffee and I have a cigarette, and then and then I talk. And now
Where's whiskey? Where's
yeah,
whiskey?
oh yeah. I mean, the whiskey's at the end of the day normally.
In the coffee, okay.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Depending on how hard a day it might be. Um, Now, I mean, obviously, I did 3 years of drama school training. That was a conservatoire training at a place called the Royal Central School of Speech and
Hmm.
Drama. So the
Hmm.
emphasis on the speech. And so we would normally have at least 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, where we
Wow.
just worked on our voice. And that would normally be about how we breathe, resonance, articulation, how we connect to our own breath, all of those kind of things. And that was really kind of like the central basis for everything that I've kind of, moving on to from now. In terms of regularly what I do kind of what I make sure is that as a freelancer, sometimes you'll have a lot of work and sometimes you'll have no work. I mean, obviously, I'm incredibly popular and successful, so I never have no work. But on those rare hypothetical occasions, what I do is I'm incredibly selfish. Because I thought, what is a good way of me making sure that I continue to practice, but also as an additional benefit might,
Mm.
create content for marketing purposes or social media purposes and all of this kind of stuff. So I thought one thing I could do is that, I've got a wealth of books that I've read and plays that I've performed or not performed, or writing from various different kind of like media that I love. Why don't I record myself doing that?
Mm.
Rather than preparing it and analyzing it and working it over for hours and hours, I press record and I just read it. Because as a voice actor, a great skill is actually your cold reading, literally being presented with the text, and then you press record and you go. And you've
Hmm.
not read it once and you don't know where it's going or anything. That's a huge skill because, in actual fact, for about 50% of the work that I record, that's it. You
Yeah.
don't get a lot of time with the script in advance because things change. With video games, everything is so highly confidential. They
Mm.
don't share the script with you until you're in the recording booth and it comes up on the screen. And now you've got to give three options of it. And you're like, I don't know what I'm saying or who I'm saying it to necessarily. And the director will almost certainly kind of give you some kind of context. But then you've got to kind of like wing it. And so that's
Mm.
what I do now is that I just spend like 10 to 15 minutes a day. And because it's writing that I love or that I'm interested in or that kind of stuff, it doesn't feel so much like work to me. Uh, but yeah, just actually recording myself doing it and getting used to hearing yourself back out loud, much as we hate it. And don't get me wrong, yeah, I'm a voice actor and I'm used to it now. But when I was starting out, even having done loads of stage work, with stage work, you don't hear your performance back. So you
Hmm.
don't know how bad or how good it was. So you can't self-analyze in the same way. Whereas with voiceover, especially when I was starting out, it was a nightmare because it was like I would say three words and then I'd be like, I'm saying it wrong, whatever wrong is, and it becomes unbearable. But you've got to kind of push past it because you get past that level of subjectivity and you start to be able to be a little bit more objective about, oh, I seem to be speeding up. Why am I speeding up? Is it because I'm a bit more anxious? Oh, it's to do with my breath. It's to do with the fact that because I haven't properly warmed up, I'm not really in my body, kind of speaking from the chest a lot, and
Hmm.
therefore the breath isn't really going down. And
Hmm.
as a result, it gets a bit more breathy and a bit quiet, and therefore I'm sounding a lot more panicked.
Yeah.
So therefore, as an adjustment, in order to feel more calm, rather than just think calm thoughts, you know, maybe concentrate just on the breathing and breathing from the belly instead, and
Hmm.
see how that affects you. And so therefore kind of treating it as a bit more of an experiment. So I'd say just kind of like having that awareness of consciousness and with any form of habit, Don't try and go like, I will practice half an hour a day or 15 minutes a day, because we've all got busy kind of like lives, or at least we can all procrastinate hugely. So instead go like, let's do it for 2 minutes a day or 1 minute a day and see if I can do 1 minute a day for a week. And then maybe do 1 minute, 10 seconds or 1 minute,
Mm,
30 and go from there. And just make it part of a habit that you cultivate. And without going to productivity mindset about it all, the habits that you cultivate, become a part of who you are. So I'm a voice actor who takes the craft of voiceover delivery and emotional
hmm
connection to text, and hopefully being articulate and hopefully being able to cold read very well. That is part of who I want to be and who I am. And
hmm
that's borne out through the habits, if that makes sense.
So you have, first of all, a lot of experience doing voiceovering. You have a lot of experience acting. You have a lot of experience learning how to do it properly.
Hmm.
But if we are talking about somebody who has no such experience, like zero point 0.0 experience in doing
Hmm.
voice, but they want to improve their voice.
Yeah.
So what is one like easiest exercise everyone can do except for reading? Everyone can read, but how to ensure that you are reading it properly? Like, what is one exercise to do daily to improve quality of your voice?
I would encourage you to play around with your range, your vocal pitch, because I
Mm,
think we all get quite set into this is a default way that I speak. It's a comfortable way that I speak. And as soon as we get pushed out of our kind of comfort zone, sometimes the voice will go in a weird and unexpected place and we don't know quite where to get it back. So it's a bit like, learning any form of instrument. The first form of the very first thing is before you learn how to play a tune, you learn the chords.
mhm,
And similarly, I think in terms of exploring your range vocally, what I would do is like read exactly the same text, maybe, but read it out loud once in your normal voice, once in a really kind of like high pitch, whatever that means to you, and once in a really low pitch. And literally not judge it about what is better or what is worse or anything else like that. And yeah, maybe it means that you do a ridiculous kind of off falsetto voice or whatever it is, that kind of thing, but push through it. And then, go down into a really kind of like deep voice and, explore what that could be in any kind of way and have fun and play with it.
yeah.
But if you kind of literally do that for a minute each with each one of those ones, you'll start to find that you've got a little bit more variety. So that doesn't mean that you'll suddenly go down there, but it means that you can maybe play around a little bit more rather than come across as monotone. And rather than thinking, this is my voice and I sound like this,
Mhm.
full stop, you go, well, yes, I sound like this, but maybe actually I've got a bit more variety. And then you could play around with, well, okay, well, maybe a higher register might be more appropriate for this kind of thing.
Hmm.
Or I find it's a lot more fun to be in that lower register. So literally playing around with pitch and playing around with the speed in which you say something. Try and say something really, really fast as you possibly can, and then as slowly as you possibly can.
Hmm.
And think about how that might have how does it affect you as the speaker? Does that emotionally put you in a different way? I would say that if you're speaking really fast for a very long period of time, for at least a minute, you're going to feel quite breathless and quite anxious by the end of a lot of things as a result of it. Good, that's a discovery, but it's something to potentially play with.
Yeah.
And similarly, if you're being really slow and deliberate all of the time, you might send yourself to sleep. But you'll also realize that, first of all, that's a way of discovering how you can maybe use pause.
Mhm.
And it's also, people say, "Oh, you come across as natural." What the fuck does natural mean? Excuse my language. But what does natural mean? And for a lot of us, it's the fact that we vary all of those things in natural conversation. If I know exactly what it is that I'm going to be talking about, then I'm going to talk quite quickly. And then when I want to make a point, then I will use a pause and maybe I'll change a register.
Yeah.
And so just having an awareness of that and then how you could and think rather than there's a right way of doing it and a wrong way of doing it, to think, well, what's a fun way of doing it? Because quite often, if it's fun for you, then actually it may be more fun to receive as a listener as a result as well. So that would be, again, my quite long-winded advice. Sorry.
Chris, I feel like you are opening Pandora box here, and I really wish to have the sky as the limit to our conversation, but time is the limit. So the final question, what is your favorite food?
What is my favorite food? It changes regularly, but I would say pizza. A dirty pizza is the comfort food generally. Any kind of pizza. I'm not even going to give a hard no to pineapple on pizza. I'm kind of, I've yet to have a pizza which is just damn wrong. So yeah, I mean that'll always go down well.
Well, welcome to the pizza club. And when I was growing up, pineapple on top of the pizza was like top pizza ever.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. You got to have, an open mind about these things, definitely. And I certainly do. Yes.
especially about pizza, exactly.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And it's been
Pleasure.
such a pleasure to hear and learn from you.
It's been a pleasure to be on. Thank you so much for the chat, Yuri. Thank you.
And thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, hit the like button or 5 stars and share it with your friend. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.